So in this video, I'm going to tell you about every backend concept that you must have to know before going into any interview. Okay, so the first concept of the release is request response lifecycle. I guess everyone know about request response model. Like there is a client and a server. The request goes from the client and the server performs some action on the request and create a response and then send the response back to client. But it's not that simple as we see. It's just a overview. It's just a top level process that we always see. There is a proper life cycle that every request has to follow. Every request on the web has to follow if we are interacting with any of the website or any of the framework. So first, the client send the request to your server. Okay. So then they create a client request. But before entering into server, you must have to know the IP of the server. You didn't have any IP right now. So like when you are entering in some website like Amazon.com, yeah, then the Amazon.com is just a domain name of that server. You don't have any IP. So if the client didn't have any IP, so how he can reach to that server? For that, we have to use some domain name system. So it is used to convert the domain name into IP address. Okay. Now we have a request, we have IP address of a server. But for transferring any request, so we have to create HTTP request. Okay, so we are just talking about HTTP request, and I will tell what slide thing you have to modify for HTTPS request. So I'm just telling about HTTP request. So you just so they are just create an HTTP request and then perform TCP handshaking. Okay, so what is TCP handshaking? Before sending of any HTTP request, you have to connect server and client through a network. So the request can be go through that network. So in TCP handshaking, they perform a three-way handshake. Okay. Before any HTTP request, TCP connection is required. HTTP only for the data. TCP provides a path so that you can send the data to a reliable source or destination. It just create a three-way handshaking process. Like first synchronization, this that's called uh, client server model. The client send the request to the server and tell that like I want to start a connection and send his sequence number, that is X. So if client send the sequence number to the server. So now server have a sequence number of a client. Okay. Then server send an acknowledgement. So server send an acknowledgement by saying that I got your sequence number and I'm sending my sequence number along with that acknowledgement. So server just sent their sequence number also. Now both of them know each other sequence number, but for the safety purpose, like maybe the sequence number of Y didn't go to the uh, X. Okay, so maybe sequence number of the server didn't went to the client. So for that, there's also a last acknowledgement process that the client sent to the server that I got your sequence. Now we can perform handshaking and we can perform the data transmission. Okay, so what the benefit of TCP handshaking? So it just make a proper connection and keep a connection. And if we talk about HTTPS in future, so just first discuss about the HTTP request. Then the HTTP request sent to the server. But before entering into server, it goes through a load balancer. Like for a good website, it goes to a load balancer for managing loads. Like if you have 5 or 6 server, like if you're talking about AWS or some another process where you deploy some server, like these are the 5 EC2 instance, and you are saying that you just have to maintain every instance a proper CPU utilization. Maybe you don't want any of the instance goes above 80% of the CPU utilization, so you just add some balancer that will send the request to different server according to the requirement. First, it goes to that server, but maybe its CPU utilization become more than 80%. Then he transfer that request to that server. So there we need some load balancer. So our server didn't get some overload or uh, didn't get some overload. That's it. And then finally it went to our server. After entering the server, request first went to the controller. The controller is responsible for getting the request and then sending to the inbuilt layer of the Spring Boot or other application. And then it goes to the service, then repository, then database, then it create a response and then send to the client. So these 5 steps are the backend part. Like these 5 steps are just pure the backend code. Like when you wrote any Spring Boot code, then you have to create these 5 things. Like there is separate controller layer, this separate service layer, and there is separate repository layer. But so this is the proper request and response lifecycle for our HTTP request. But when we are talking about HTTP as request, so there need an TLS handshaking also for the security purpose. Okay, so for performing TCP handshake, we also need some TLS handshake. So that we also have some security purpose. And we know about HTTP, it's hypertext transfer protocol. So it's an application protocol, TCP transmission protocol, and there are the 4 main part of the HTTP request. First, a request line. Second, header, empty line, and optional body. On the optional body, maybe you don't want to send any data, you just want to fetch a data. So you don't have to send any data along with the body. You just have to empty line just for the separation, and you just have to send headers and request line. And you know about the load balancer, I just told you that it ensures the scalability of your application. Maybe you want to maybe first only 100% in your website, and your server is fully capable of managing these 100%. But maybe due to some sale or some advertisement, your website got hit by a large number of the people. Then your server are unable to manage these load. So you just have to add some more server, and the load balancer just transfer the load to some another server.